Today's Toy Spot, we are having a look at the Hasbro Star Wars The Black Series Entertainment Earth exclusive box set. What would you get in this box set? Well, you get a Sand Trooper Sergeant, Crimson Stormtrooper, Lieutenant Oxygzo, which I'm not sure if that's correct pronunciation, and R2-Q5. A couple of these are repaints, more importantly the Stormtrooper and R2-Q5, but the only way that you can get them is getting this exclusive box set from Entertainment Earth. So of course I'll provide the link down below. If you guys are interested in picking this up, head over to Entertainment Earth right away and get this box set. The Star Wars Black Series, I don't pick up all of them. I kind of gravitate, I think, a little bit more towards the like the old original trilogy when it comes to those particular figures. I never did get an R2-D2, so getting the R2-Q5 I think was pretty cool to get that in the black, all-color black scheme. So I'm gonna look at that closer, of course, when we get this opened up. Spin around the back. Each of the figures luckily have read-ups. Sand Trooper Sergeant says Imperial Sand Troopers carry out the will of the Emperor in the harsh, arid environments of the galaxy's desert worlds. Crimson Stormtrooper, however, says specially trained for operations in the extreme temperatures of volcanic areas, these crimson-clad stormtroopers stay cool in the heat of battle. Which is kind of funny because they all look like they have the same similar armor. Lieutenant Oxygzo, which again I'm not quite sure if that's the correct pronunciation, piloted one of the 4 TIE fighters shot down while pursuing the Millennium Falcon during the escape from the Death Star before the Battle of Yavin. R2-Q5, entrusted with the secrets of the Emperor himself, the Imperial R2 unit once thwarted a plot to turn every droid aboard the second Death Star against the Empire. You can also check out more from Hasbro at going to www.starwars.hasbro.com. Spot's going to take a break and get this box set opened up, but when we come back, we're going to get a better look at the 4 figures from this Entertainment Earth exclusive. There's more heading your way, guys. Don't go anywhere. Stay tuned. Okay, so let's get a better look at the figures that came packaged inside the Entertainment Earth exclusive. First things first, let's have a look at the Sand Trooper. Now, the Sand Trooper Sergeant, to be honest, I don't know if it's that much different than the regular Sand Trooper, other than maybe a couple of different deco swapped options, like especially around the face, where there's all this extra inclusion of blue, which I don't believe the original Sand Trooper had. I also feel like the shoulder, and not having owned the previous Sand Trooper, I think the shoulder pad is slightly a little bit different too. Other than the white, which kind of is jarring, the pad itself, the shoulder guard here, the rest of the figure has this dirty, like scruffed up coloring to him, which would make perfect sense for, of course, a Sand Trooper that's been out in the harsh climates, the sand, the dirt, the debris. The white pad somehow seems a little jarring because of that, but it's a great looking figure. There's the way it looks like on the back. Still retains all the same articulation as we saw before. And I think there was a Sand Trooper in the Black Series 6-inch, I should say, size. And of course, removing this, you would basically just have a Stormtrooper. He comes with tons of accessories, and the wrist is a little stiff on this figure. There we go. He comes with ton of different accessories. One of which being a backpack, which you can take, and you have to move this out of the way first. And this pegs just onto the back here. It's not quite centered. Well, the peg isn't quite centered. The backpack is. And that just pegs on like so. And then this section just drapes over the front, which separates it a lot more from just being a conventional Stormtrooper. It's very big. It's bulky. It does give a little extra back weight to him, so getting him to stand can be a little harder once you incorporate the backpack. Backpack looks good. I could have used maybe some of the dirtier areas that the Stormtrooper had. Could have carried that over a little bit to the backpack. Still, it's a good look. He comes with other accessories as well. A tried and true, trusty Stormtrooper blaster. But again, if you want to depart more further away from it looking like a Stormtrooper, he also comes with a couple of more not necessarily, well, it looks a little more organic, the kind of blasters here. More like just, like roughly constructed. I know they would have been constructed the same manner, but it just has a more like rougher look to it. And he has a long blaster. And he also comes with this as well, which this does not move. I thought initially this would have moved, but it's sculpted in place. And I'm likely displaying him more so with this blaster, which again is more like a rifle. And luckily with the posability the way it is, you could get the arm around and attach it underneath. But it involved just a little bit of getting the fingers around it. Getting the fingers to bend as well would be helpful. There we go. And I had this earlier. I don't know why all of a sudden it's giving me problems. There we go. Well, there we go. So that's probably how I'll display the Sand Trooper, the Sergeant. Take that off. In the way of his posability, the three figures here pretty much would have the same posability. The only difference, of course, would be the R2 here. But their heads are on ball joints. Shoulders hinge out. This one's a little more restricted, of course, as you would expect it, because he's got the shoulder guard at the top there. They have a swivel point at the bicep. He also has a hinge, a double hinge in the elbow, and a rotation and hinge in the hand. When it comes to his torso is on a ball joint. Doesn't appear to have any waist swivel at all. And then the legs have their own independent hinge, also a swivel point at the top of the thigh, double hinge knees, and hinge feet. Which also, somebody asked before if a hinge on some figures also gives you a pivot. This particular figure does have a pivot as well. Very tried and true. No real complaints at all to be said for the Sand Trooper. Put him right there. Get him to properly stand. Sometimes you got to get their feet flat. There we go. And move the accessories over there. Okay, so like one of the more distinct variants and exclusives to this set is this really vibrant red with the Crimson Stormtrooper. Again, I'm not sure how their armor would differ than a regular Stormtrooper for, you know, hotter climates. Maybe there are some sort of cooling mechanisms inside the armor itself. It's very jarring to see a Stormtrooper in this color, because you almost imagine to see the Emperor's Royal Guard in this color scheme versus that of a Stormtrooper. And while I may not necessarily buy into volcanic environments, I mean, I also would have considered this a Stormtrooper that probably could have accompanied the Emperor above and beyond, of course, the Royal Guards that he has. The wrist on this one is a little stiff as well. For his accessories, he comes with the same Stormtrooper blaster as the Sand Trooper carried. And this particular one, unlike the Sand Trooper, he does also have a holster that can fit the blaster. So that's nice to keep it out of the way, because he also comes with this, which kind of almost looks like, it doesn't quite look like a minigun, but it looks like the barrel would be a more powerful blast versus the rifle that the Sand Trooper would have carried. And I'm assuming, based on the read-up, that somehow probably the guns are more suited for hotter climates as well. So maybe they don't overheat, or maybe something like of that nature. I do really appreciate that a second bend in the elbow is put there, because at least you can pose the arm further up. You know, if you had a couple of these, and again, I think this is the only way to get the Crimson Stormtrooper, but if you had a couple of these, you could have them all kind of in a row with their rifles up. A really great look. He's a little on the loose side. His torso, maybe it's not so much the torso, I guess it's just the legs. The legs are a little on the loose side. There we go. You can see that like that. Posability would be the exact same as that of the Snowtrooper, the Sand Trooper. Same ball joint. And that gives you a better idea of what we're talking about here. He's got a ball joint, and he's also got a hinge. So the hinge gives you the extra bend in the neck where it can lean forward and lean back, but then he's got the ball joint at the top as well. Same hinged shoulders, nothing new there. Same swivel point in the bicep, double hinged elbows, hinged and rotation hands, ball joint upper torso, and of course the hinged legs with the cut at the top for rotation in the thigh, double hinged knees, and finally hinged feet. Gotta be honest, it's a little jarring to see the design of a stormtrooper decked out in red. I'm not against the look, but it just seems weird because I'm just so used to seeing the stormtrooper here in white and black. To see him in red, it works for him, but it's kind of jarring to my eyes. Next, moving along, we have the TIE pilot. I guess they theoretically could have just called him a TIE fighter pilot. Instead, they call him Lieutenant XXO. It's OXIXO. I don't know how you would want to pronounce that. Oxixo. Not sure if we've actually received a TIE fighter pilot before in the Star Wars 6-inch Black Series line. I'm pretty sure we did get him in a smaller 3 3/4 inch, unless he's just a scaled up version of that. His accessory includes the same blaster as the other two stormtroopers or troopers, and it can fit right in the front. It's a little more out in the front versus the stormtrooper, which sits further to the side. But I guess you could rotate it. You could really rotate them all the way to the back if you wanted to as well, just depending on your personal preference. I've always really liked the helmet of the TIE fighters, or at least TIE fighter pilots. It pretty much is a stormtrooper with the inclusion of this helmet. If you took this off, it could theoretically, well, it wouldn't because this would be one helmet, but it would be basically the same sort of design. And then they've added the additional hoses in the front for it being in different, different environments. And I guess this would also serve as a breathing mask too, because he's out in space flying a TIE fighter. The coloring on him is just more neutral, being that he's got just the black. There's a couple of areas that break it up, being the silver on the front buckle. There's little silver accents on the side where you've got the Empire logo, which also carries over nicely to the top of the helmets as well. Very Vader-esque too in the front there with the console, little control console. Posability on him would be the same. Same posable head, same arm articulation, hinged elbows, rotation hands. Basically everything on the two troopers that we've already had a look at carries over here as well with XXO. Again, I don't know, not quite sure how to pronounce his name specifically. Lieutenant Oxixo. But he still has the cut at the top of the thigh. Same double hinged knee, hinged foot. Very cool. And finally, honestly, one of the more impressive of the four, I think I kind of like this guy the most. This little R2 unit. R2D5 is clearly a repaint of R2D2, which I think again came in the 6-inch Black Series, just been repainted. And I think a lot of the things carried over as well from the original R2 unit. This little section opens up in the front, and this little area opens up in the front as well. And you've got a couple of arms that can come out. A little harder, you're gonna have to move the legs out of the way. And these little arms do come out. Very tricky, I must say, at times to get these out, because you got to get your finger in there. If you had pliers, or little tweezers, I should say, you can get them to come out. And he's also got the leg area here that comes out too. Again, it's very difficult to get your finger in there. If you don't have nails, sometimes it pays to have nails for reviews, because you can get fingers in there and actually grab these things. I might actually have to take a pair of pliers or a little bit of tweezers to get this to come out. Hold on one second. For all the struggling Spot was doing with trying to get R2Q5's leg out, Turns out all you have to do is just rotate the head. Which seems familiar to me. I think if R2 was available as a Black Series 6-inch figure, I think it had the same option to move the leg out. I don't know why I struggled so much to get that leg out when it was a lot easier just to rotate the head. So you can have it R2Q5, which for some reason I keep wanting to call him R2D5, but R2Q5, you can either have him displayed like this, or I think to make him a little less R2, I probably would end up displaying him just with the legs as you see like that. Which is a good segue also to the articulation on R2Q5. His legs do rotate around. There's a hinge at the bottom struts, if you want to call it that. Struts at the bottom of the leg. There's also a posable option on the middle leg as well. It's not as much. You got just a little bit of a pivot going on there as well. And I guess if you want to theoretically consider it, the little side doors, you want to consider that posable too, as they do open and close. But there's not really a lot to him. One of the things that carried over from the R2D2 is that these little panels at the top remove. He has 3 of them. There's one there, and one there. They remove, but there's nothing really that you can add to them, as R2Q5 does not come with any additional accessories. I guess Hasbro could have really just kept this just as one sculpt. They didn't have to include removable panels, as again, this particular droid doesn't come with anything else that you can add to it. I like the coloring of him too. I'm surprised that he doesn't have more red as opposed to the copper that they ended up going with. But I think a lot of the Empire droids tend to have more copper color and less red. But a lot of areas seem swapped for this copper. Areas on R2 that would have been blue, silver, white, they've now basically swapped all of it out for the copper. The back is a little more void, though you have a couple of areas of silver, which helps break up all the black. They could have probably given us black around his optical eye, I guess if you want to consider it that way, but instead they swapped for black. And I guess maybe it just keeps it more a darker looking droid versus having more, coloring around the eye area. Surprisingly, of all the 4 figures, I think I like this one maybe the most. I also have a soft spot for R2 and just droids in general. But I like the coloring that they ended up going with, and by giving us a simple paint swap out, you can get an existing R2D2 and instead give us R2Q5. So it's just a matter of changing out paint. And you get this little guy here, which again could be my favorite. Certainly a really great set. If you're a fan of these Star Wars 6-inch Black Series figures, and you're one that wants to collect any ones that are getting released, this particular box set gives you ones that you wouldn't be able to find anywhere else. So there's certainly big pluses to the fact if you would want to pick this up for yourself. The Crimson Stormtrooper, still a little jarring for me to be seeing him in red. But I really like the paint changes that they've done to maybe some of the existing figures that we've seen to give us brand new characters. Today we're having a look at the Star Wars 6-inch Black Series figures from Entertainment Earth. Spot will provide certainly the link down below if you are interested. Certainly also stay tuned, guys. Spot's going to have more Toy Spots heading your way. Thanks for watching, as you always do. I'll see you next time.